All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Torreson. I work at the Houston-Galveston Area Council. I'd like to thank you for joining our Rural and Small Town Downtown Revitalization Summit this morning. We'll be recording today and everyone will be on mute. So if you have any questions, we encourage you to engage with our presenters today. We'd like you to put those in the chat and you'll see the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom bar today. So this is HGAC's third annual summit that focuses on best practices for rural and small towns. Nationally, the non-metro population has declined about 0.5% in the last decade, but that's not the only story. A recent Brookings Institute report reported that rural populations in the United States are increasingly diverse, and especially in the Houston-Galveston region. Many rural places are actually majority people of color, specifically Latinx populations. And continued growth around the city of Houston and in our region is expected to transform the character of rural and small towns. Another interesting finding from that report was that rural counties with recreation-focused economies were more likely to gain population in the last decade. And we'll be hearing a little bit more about that later today, as our webinar today is focused on outdoor recreation and nature tourism in rural places. So rural places provide access to waterways, trails, other natural areas, and a home base for visitors. During the pandemic, we saw that urban dwellers flocked to rural places, and rural and small towns can facilitate that access, and then also strategically draw visitors to local coffee shops and restaurants and other downtown businesses. So today we're going to be hearing from national experts and some local experts as well. We'll start by talking about rural land sale trends in our region, and then we'll discuss the implications of those trends on the urgency and the necessity of rural places maximizing their open spaces and outdoor recreation amenities. And then we'll hear about the benefits of trails and trail connectivity. We'll talk about nature tourism opportunities in Texas and how you might be able to tap into that wonderful world of nature tourism that's alive and well in our region. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for today, Dr. Charles Gilliland, a research economist at the Texas Real Estate Research Center and an associate professor of agricultural economics at A&M. Dr. Gilliland, I'll share the screen over to you and you can get started when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here to talk to you about what's going on in rural land markets at the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M University. I focus on what's happening in land markets across the state. And the first thing that I want to note this morning is this photograph that I have, which kind of is the theme of what I see happening in the land markets nowadays. They're basically on fire across the entire state. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but a little bit of the context of what we're talking about at this point is we'll be focusing on the small properties in the particular markets. But the land markets are basically creatures of their environment, if you will. The developments in markets are derived from what's going on in the society and the economy at large. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of telling you about where we are, where we've been over the past couple of years, because it's been unprecedented. When we started into the year 2020, these are the kind of scenes that we were used to seeing. A lot of people involved in a lot of activities. And then something happened in the spring of that year. The coronavirus appeared, and our gatherings started to look a lot more like this. And then, just to add a little spice to the thing, in the summer of that year, we organized some of these kind of activities in some of our major cities, which had an impact on people's behavior and specifically with respect to the rural land market. Just to kind of put it into a context from an economic standpoint, the government basically saw bad things coming when coronavirus appeared, that we were going to have lots of unemployment. We're basically shutting down the economy. And so the response to that was to stimulate the economic activity with a lot of government spending. And just to put it into perspective, this is a slide that was developed by the Washington Post that shows the expenditures on the New Deal, the Great Recession, and the COVID-19 stimulus. They're in 2021 dollars, so they're comparable dollars to make this various period comparisons. And they put it in perspective on the New Deal. They spent basically kind of the equivalent of about $6,500 per capita over a 10-year period from 1930 to 1940. Then when we had that Great Recession back in 2008, from 2009 to 2012, they spent roughly $7,500 per person in the country. But look at what they did in March of 2021 and December of 2020. They eclipsed that total spending in less than a year. And overall, they spent nearly closing in on $15,000 per capita. So the point of this slide is that from an economic standpoint, we have never seen anything quite like this in the history of our country. And that has had an effect on what's going on in the land market. Here's one of the things that economists look at, which is the money that's available to be spent in the economy. And if you look back at that gray period from 2008 onward, that's the Great Recession. And during the Great Recession, there was an increase in the money supply, but it was a pretty small one, although it did stay after the Great Recession was over with. But it was nothing like what we see here in 2020 when the federal government dumped a lot of money on the economy. And it had an impact on real disposable personal income. One of the things that we look at with respect to land markets is what happens to disposable personal income, because it has a really strong correlation with land prices. And when I saw that third quarter boost there in 2020, I thought, well, that's not going to be the case any longer. That there's going to be an decoupling, because this is not organic increase in disposable personal income. It's the government transfer payments. But guess what? I was wrong about that. It had the same kind of an effect that it has always had. And you can see the effect of all of that government spending here on disposable personal income. And oh, by the way, how did we pay for it? Well, we paid for it by borrowing money. This is a chart that shows the Fed's balance sheet. The Federal Reserve bought bonds to monetize the expenditures, and you can see back in 2009 there was a big uptick in the Fed's balance sheet. They added a lot of government securities back then, but it's nothing like what we saw in 2020. So long story short, as an economist, we're just guessing about what's going to happen next, like the rest of you. And I know that some of my audiences seem to find that disquieting presentation there of facts. So I have adopted the policy of adding pictures of puppies to make you feel better after I give you some of the news that I'm imparting. So here are your puppies to make you feel better this morning before we get into the land markets. Now, as we go on into the land markets, just a little background information about how we get sales information reported to us every quarter, and we have partitioned that in by size, looking at a 60-year distribution of the number of acres in transactions. We split them out into what are called quintiles. So we said that everything that's larger than the 20th percentile, which is the smallest quintile, is what we're going to study. We're going to segregate out the properties that are smallest, the 20th percentile down. And in the area that we're going to be looking at, that amounts to 40 acres. So what we're going to be looking at this morning are sales of land in the Gulf Coastal Bend area between 10 acres and 40 acres. This is the region that we're going to be looking at. And I focused on this region because this is the Houston-Galveston area. But I see that a lot of you participants have come under the tent flap from all over the state. So the bad news is it's just going to be focused on this area, but the good news is what's going on in this area is pretty much what's going on across the state with variations in numbers. So bear in mind now we're looking at 10 to 40 acre sales within this region. And here is from 2012 to 2021, the numbers of sales that occurred in this region. And these are annualized numbers, so they represent 4 quarters. So when you're looking at 2021 quarter 2, that's the first and second quarters of 2021 and the third and fourth quarters of 2020. And the thing that was remarkable to this is that, from my perspective, is that when we went into the pandemic and we started to have all of that activity going on last year, the urban unrest and that sort of thing, the markets were going pretty dormant, even for the small land markets. You can see that in 2020 quarter 1 and quarter 2 that we had kind of a muted number of sales. And then in quarter 3, things exploded. And they have been doing nothing but going up since then. I have preliminary numbers on quarter 3 of this year that show that they may be off a little bit, but that's probably largely because a lot of the brokers no longer have anything that they for sale. People are just hanging on to what they have. The number of acres sold, these are you can see there was an explosion in the total acres that were reported to us. The total dollar volume was $123,500,000 roughly in 2021, even though the total acreage was down. The total dollar volume was up because prices were up strongly overall. And this is a chart that shows the price per acre for the small properties in the Coastal Bend area over the 60-year period, roughly 60-year period. The blue line represents the nominal price, or the price per acre that was shown in the transactions. And the orange line shows that price deflated back to $1966. So you can see that we've had a tremendous growth in the price per acre from 2000 on, and it's continuing on. As a matter of fact, from 2012 through the second quarter of 2021, we went from roughly 7,500 an acre to 12,200 an acre roughly. And in real terms, that was quite an expansion as well, from 4296. oh, pardon me, that's not the real terms. The bottom line is now what happened with large properties. So the large properties went from 4,300 an acre to 7,550 roughly. And one of the things that this chart expresses pretty eloquently in my mind from an economist standpoint is that there must be an opportunity to make a lot of money by turning large ones into small ones. Because if you can buy it for 7,500 and sell it for 12,000, you can bank a lot of cash. Here's a summary of what happened with those prices. They were only up about 7% over last year, but the sales volume is up 78%. So that price per acre increase would have been larger if it had been a normal situation, but since there are so many sales going on, and it's an indication that that everything was selling, even the undesirable properties. So the sale of less desirable properties probably kept that price increase from being even larger. The total acres were off just a little bit, but the total dollar volume is also up over 50%. So it was an extremely active market, really on fire, if you will. So now where the people are always asking me what to expect. For some reason, they think that economists have some sort of crystal ball. Well, even if we're pretending that we do during this situation, as I've described the economic environment earlier, we're guessing just like everybody else is. The first question is, can these trends that we've seen over the past year persist? And I can tell you that when you speak to all of the rural land brokers that I deal with, their answer is no. They just don't believe that the market can continue to be as hot as it is. But at this juncture, we don't see anything in the future that is calling a halt to it. So as I pointed out, there's a lot of pressure to fragment ownership, buying large properties. I'm hearing story after story about people that and investment companies that are buying ranches that are 500 to 1,000 acres, splitting them up into 10 to 20 acre tracts and selling the whole thing out over a weekend. So there is a lot of pressure to break up the larger holdings, which is going to essentially create a demand for services out in the countryside that hasn't been there before. One of the brokers that I spoke to said, I'm dealing with a whole different bunch of buyers now. The predominant question that I get asked is, how far is it to the nearest HEB? And he said, that's different than the guys in the boots and the cowboy hats that I used to deal with. And so that may lead to confrontations out in the countryside that some of you may have to deal with as the new population moves in and they're not the same as the older population. So those are some of the thoughts that I have about what we're seeing going on and what it might mean going forward. And here's your next puppy to make you feel better about all of this. And that pretty much is what I have to impart to you this morning. If you have concerns or want to get in touch with me after this, that's my email address, cgilliland@tamu, c-gilliland@tamu.edu. And that phone number at the bottom is where you can reach me on my cell phone. It's 979-220-9179. And with that, I will tell you that we have a lot of information online. The large property data is published out there, available every quarter as we update the numbers. So with that, I will stop my screen sharing and we'll get on with the program.
Great, thank you so much. That was a lot of good data. And I have to say, when I read the report that you put out, and I think it was February, I also was um, impressed by all the data that you have for all of Texas. So people who aren't from our region should go check it out. Um, and let's see if we have any questions. I'll just say again that if you have any questions for Dr. Gilliland, put them in the chat, and we'll ask our speakers to answer a couple now and then continue engaging in the chat as the presentation goes on. We have one for you, Dr. Gilliland. Is it possible to freeze property tax on fixed income residents to survive property value increases?
Well, they basically have done that for those of us who are over 65. They've froze our property taxes at where they were the year we turned 65. So those of us who have hair the color of mine, what little there is, don't worry about what's going on with evaluation. So it is possible to do that. But it would take political will at the legislative in the legislative area to get that kind of a ball rolling. But they did something similar to that in California with their Proposition 13 out there, and so it is possible, yes.
All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat now. So if you have them, type them in there and hopefully Dr. Gilliland can answer them. So the next presenter we have today is Ms. Liz Thorstensen, the Vice President of Trail Development at the Rails to Trails Conservancy. Oh, okay. Liz, are you? Oh, wonderful. All right, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much to HDAC for having me. I'm really excited that you all are talking about all of this great momentum towards downtown revitalization for small and rural towns. And I'm going to talk to you this morning about the perspective of that comeback to small towns and rural towns from trail networks and economic development as a driver. So I have a lot of content here. I'm probably going to try to go through the beginning slides fairly quickly. And thanks to Sarah, who's going to advance them for me so that I can get to the back end of the presentation where I have a lot of good content and advice for you. So I'm going to go quickly through the beginning. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Just a little bit about Rails to Trails Conservancy. We opened our doors in 1986 and really have been the home of the grassroots movement of rail trails ever since. And our mission really started about providing technical assistance on how to create rail trails. And now, as our movement has matured and there's tens of thousands of rail trails all over the country, including in Texas, our mission is really about how do we connect those trails into thoughtful systems that serve communities in a variety of powerful outcomes. And one of those is definitely economic development, economic revitalization, equitable economic development. So I'm gonna be talking to you about that angle of it this morning. So the next slide, just a little agenda. I'm gonna do a really quick snippet on the growth and demand for trails and outdoor recreation, and how trails and trail networks are foundational to economic competitiveness. I'm going to talk really briefly about trail-oriented development, spend more time on trail towns, and then hopefully the most amount of time on your all's role and what you can do to kind of reap these types of benefits that I'm going to be going over. So really quickly on the big picture, do another national map for you. Lots of great maps this morning on Dr. Gilliland's presentation too. This is a slide that talks about, it's from Headwaters Economics, which is a firm I have no affiliation with, but I just really love them. They do a lot of the economics around the outdoor economy. And so this is about recreation counties, which are counties that have a large recreation related economy That gets defined by the US Department of Ag. Their Economic Research Service defines that. And they did this study in 2019 that looked back about 9 years from 2019 standpoint, and it showed that recreation really appears to drive different economic benefits, including short-term support for tourism-related businesses, but longer-term support for recruiting new residents who might be business owners, entrepreneurs, or workers in that economy. And those counties that have outdoor recreation economies are also more likely to attract newer residents that have greater wealth and have faster growing wages than their non-recreation counterparts. And these trends, what they found, are particularly true in more rural communities. So that's why I wanted to highlight this. If you go to their website, Headwaters Economics, you can dive into this study. I really recommend it. It's fascinating. And then the next slide just shows that map of what are defined as recreation counties as classified by the USDA Economic Research Service. So if you don't see your county on here, which you probably don't, because you see that there aren't a ton of them, they're the darker kind of teal color. But the thing to keep in mind is that this isn't static, right? This is just a definition using different calculations. And the idea is, to kind of, if you want to use this as a strategy to move towards that recreation economy, if that's something your county is prioritizing. And so don't view this map as kind of a fixed thing. This is just a snapshot of what is defined as recreation counties right now. So the next slide, I'm going to go really quickly through the next, I would say 3 or 4 slides, just to give you a sense that you probably all know during peak COVID, we just saw unprecedented demand for being outside, and especially for being outside on trails. And so much demand that we had to do a lot of really spur of the moment content and webinars and conversations with thousands of our partners on the ground who are planners, county employees, all the volunteers, all kinds of people, to provide support and to connect folks that were really having to deal with those surges in demand with other folks who maybe hadn't been hit quite as hard yet but could see it coming, and how to manage all of this demand for trails and trail networks. So it was a great, it was, in spite of a really horrible situation, it was a great year for trails. And what we found, and we can go on to the next slide too, and what we found is, even as we move past that, obviously into 2021 now, coming up on the end of 2021 shortly, is that even as we didn't hit those peak numbers like we did in 2020, that 2021 numbers still are way above the 2019 numbers in terms of sustained trail use. So this is a trend that has really maintained itself, even though it's not as quite as high as that peak surge in 2020. And the next slide, one more snippet about this topic about demand. Actually, one more slide onto this one. This is a really important survey that's done every year out of Boston University. It's the Menino survey of mayors. You might be familiar with it. And they interview all these mayors across the entire country about big trends that they see. And so they did a lot of coverage on this topic of the outdoors and parks and recreation space and trails in the 2020 at the end of 2020. And what they found is that 3 out of every 4 mayors expect residents to spend more time visiting parks, that they expect that trend to really continue into the future, and just how important that is for planning and prioritizing strategies going forward. But they also said that despite that they thought the demand would maintain, that they thought it would be hard to continue to prioritize funding it. So you see there's a disconnect there between seeing that the demand is rising, but then also being, having the funding to maintain all of that infrastructure, pay for it, keep it going. So there's definitely our work cut out for us in terms of a challenge there. So if we can go to the next slide and then skip right on to the following slide after that. I wanted to talk a little bit about our lens on trails, our Trail Nation program. I wanted to let you all know that this really started as us working in 8 different places across the country And we're doing these deep dive projects where we're bringing trails together. We're connecting trails into networks and systems and having all the goal of kind of creating different kinds of outcomes depending on the regional geography and the culture of those places. So they all have a little bit of a different focus. And we're still continuing those projects. And as we're learning how to do this work, since it's pretty new work, we're starting what we're calling our Trail Nation Collaborative. And so you all are going to be very welcome to be a part of that. We're going to be launching that in 2022. And basically, it's just a very open trail learning collaborative where we're going to invite folks who are working on trail networks together to have really curated content all the time, have peer learning so folks can be learning from each other. And then we're also pulling all the lessons learned that we've learned so far from doing this work, and we're going to be putting it in a pretty comprehensive online toolkit that's going to be have lots of video content and be interactive. So that's all coming at the beginning of first quarter of 2022. So if you're interested, come to our website, and there's different lists you can get on. We'll update you, or you can just email me directly. I'll share my email with you at the end of the presentation. So just wanted to kind of give you a way to hook into us and get more free content about how to do this work in your communities. So next slide, this is just a snippet of those 8 places where we're working. And you can go to our website to find out more about all of that great work. And then if we go to the next slide, why do we care so much about, this idea of like a trail network or a trail system, and why does that matter? And the reason it matters is that what we found is that, one trail is really great, but what becomes more useful to people and has better outcomes for places is when you have a seamlessly connected system, both from a recreation standpoint and from an active transportation standpoint, and just and those economic benefits too. And so we did a study, I think in 2018, and we found that when trail connections are made between each other, we see usage go up by 40 to 80%. So those are really powerful numbers. And that's why we continue to have evidence that shows this is important work that we're doing. And then, of course, just lots of these kind of snippets of information, this one from the National Association of Realtors, and just really how much people prioritize having walkable amenities, whether it's rural or suburban or urban, whatever the context, people want walkable amenities near their homes. And we know that trails and connected trails are a big important part of that. So I'll go quickly through the next couple of slides. And this one is just a little bit about our work in Baltimore, which is one of those Trail Nation projects. But I wanted you to see this is a great piece that came out of the Baltimore Business Journal, how this trail network that we're doing in Baltimore City is really about driving equitable economic growth. That's really the focus. So a lot of times, I think the old school model of trails and trail networks is really like, oh yeah, that's kind of like this nice to have amenity. But really the vision now is doing it in a way that's really thoughtful, that drives these equitable economic outcomes, and is really part of the economic development strategy for places on the rural, urban and suburban scales. And the next slide, this is a little bit about our work in the DC region where I'm located. And we cover, for this network, it's a vision of over 900 connected miles. And we go all the way from, DC proper, all the way out into the exurbs to hopefully get to those 900 connected miles. So again, we're covering kind of all 3 scales of density. And this was a report that we launched last spring and got great coverage in the Washington Post, but really talking about the financial and economic benefits that finishing the network would bring to the entire region and what that means. And this was a really great kind of coverage that we got. We were really happy. The launch of the report, along with this kind of level of coverage, is a really great tool for increasing the momentum of getting this kind of infrastructure, getting that political will behind it. And next slide, this is just a little snippet from the report itself. I'm not going to go into these numbers. You can read them, but I just wanted to show that having this kind of report, these kinds of factual numbers that talk about what are the economic benefits going to be once this network is done is really, really important with putting this kind of infrastructure on par with any other kind of infrastructure priority. And next slide, please. So I wanted to start moving into more of the weeds and get a little bit deeper. And I want to talk a little bit about this term that we call trail-oriented development. And this is a great sketch that someone on our staff did. And you can get a sense where the trail was in the middle. That's really the focal point. And then really it's about, again, whatever scale you're on. This sketch was a little bit more urban, suburban, but whatever scale you're on, you can really thoughtfully plan with the trail as the main focus and plan development that is accompanying it that can be catalyzed by the presence of the trail or the trail network. So it's really about creating not just the trail itself, but really an integrated land use system and a framework to guide economic development. So I'm going to talk about a few more examples of this. If we go to the next slide, please. This is an example from our Capital Trail Network in the DC region study. This is a sketch of our Metropolitan Branch Trail, and this is one of the breweries that decided to co-locate along the trail. And there's been quite a lot of development along this one trail, which is pretty new, relatively new within like the last decade, but a lot of that development has happened more like in the last 5 to 7 years. So this is just an example of a business that's what we say trail facing. So really oriented towards the trail, really trying to serve the business users and welcome people in from the trail. And next slide, a more urban example. This is, but I just wanted to give you a variety of examples. This is the Midtown Greenway in Minneapolis on the next slide. And thank you. And this is a great example of how a rail trail, which you can see, which is kind of what we call below grade, where the original railroad track was below grade, but how it was really thoughtfully planned with a land use up above and thoughtfully integrated of how are you going to access it in a way where people aren't down there on the trail and isolated, and what's going to be the land use plan for up above. And so they did this whole comprehensive plan that was really not treating the trail as separate, but treating it as this connection point between all these different land uses across many different blocks. Again, thinking thoughtfully, if you look at that ramp on the right, you just think it's a ramp, great, but it's really important to be thoughtful about that. How much can people enter and exit? All of the, having accessibility from an ADA standpoint, all of those things, again, so that those are important details, and I'll go into that in a little bit. The next slide is more of getting into that theme that talks about the kind of out migration from more urban and urban suburbs to more exurban and more rural counties. So this is Frederick, Maryland. This is probably about 90 minutes from me here in the District of Columbia. This definitely used to be much more of a rural-based small town, but has really experienced a lot of growth due to over the years of out-migration from the inner suburbs of DC. So it does benefit from being that exurban market from a major metropolitan area, but nonetheless, really have that heritage and those bones of being of a small town. And this was just a really fabulous example. I have a YouTube video that I don't have time to share, but I'll put it in the chat when I wrap up, because I want you to have the YouTube video that you can watch later. This is just such a fabulous example of where they had a buried flood mitigation creek that came, I think, in the 60s or 70s. They built that to mitigate floodwaters. And then they realized, I think about 15 years ago, they could actually build a creek and a trail along both sides of the creek and activate more of their downtown space. So you can see these fabulous old buildings, some of which were factories, some of which, were infill, but they just so thoughtfully used this ribbon of creek and revitalized creek, and then added trail space to really activate more parts of the downtown. It's beautifully designed, it's beautifully maintained. It has all these really thoughtful access points that go throughout it, so that, again, you can easily get on or off it. And the amount of retail along this vastly outpaces even my urban neighborhood in DC. So this was just an incredible investment on their part. And I think the last I checked, I don't know the exact numbers, but the last I checked, it was something like $150 million worth of investment came in because of the project. And it's already a mile and a half long, and I think they're planning to even extend it more. And so I think the goal is to add more dense housing along it. These are mostly been like retail uses, commercial uses. They think there's like a museum. I think there's a school, there's an art space. You can see these great park spaces. They have lots of activities and festivals along it to constantly activate it. I went there, gosh, like I think in August on a hot evening in August, and it was hopping. So it's an amazing space that is a great example of how to do this kind of thing really, really well to drive those economic benefits. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about trail towns to start to wrap up, and then get into what your all's role could be to spark this kind of work. So trail towns are really a model of economic revitalization that, again, makes trails the centerpiece for community revitalization. And it bridges these gaps between urban, suburban, and rural. And that's really kind of the goal, is you're bringing in users that have that can bring in dollars from outside your community, and you're bringing them into more rural communities and using it to revitalize those places. And if we go to the next slide, this is a little old. There's more examples now, which I'm happy to say, but this gives you just a flavor. These were established, what we call trail town programs. The first one it's called the Trail Town Program. It's run through a CDFI called the Progress Fund out of Pennsylvania. If you Google that, you'll find tons of information. And so these are just a couple other ones. Like I said, more have been added since I made this slide. And so if we go to the next slide, I wanted to talk about what is a Trail Town program. It's really about improving connectivity between the trail and the town that it might be going through or might be going right next to. And so it's having, really great signage that brings people off the trail into the town. It's having those amenities in the town. So it's having small businesses, where people can eat, sleep, eat ice cream cone, have a beer, whatever it is. It's having great programming, like that example I just showed you, where there's always kind of something going on, but really just even the basics. Like you have to be able to welcome people and be able to, have them have a place to eat and sleep and go to the bathroom, things like that, and hopefully linger and spend their money in your town. And so usually the program works to kind of first investigate, do you have that set up? And then also, do you have a culture of hospitality? Are you ready to welcome people? Is this something the community wants? And then for it to work, if it's a trail system or one trail that's really long distance, is spread across, let's say 50 to 100 or 100 plus miles, hopefully. It's really about connecting small towns along that network or that linear trail, so that someone could plan to do, let's say, 3 days or a week, and be able to continue and have towns along their way that, again, they can they eat, can they sleep, can they do the basic things, can they spend their money? And so that's what these programs really work to do. And it really follows a Main Street. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Main Street program. it really follows that kind of approach. It's really quite similar. And I think the bulk of the work, the fun work, I think, is when you can get into like the marketing and the branding and the welcoming people. But I think the hard work is really, do you have those businesses? What do you need to do to foster, developing those businesses and developing those entrepreneurs? I think that's a lot of the deeper, harder work. And if we go to the next slide, this is just a few examples of, oh, sorry, I went out of order. So I already talked about that one. So we'll go to the next slide, sorry. If you click once more, there'll be a little box that pops up. Thank you so much. So some of the critical elements to success of trail towns and trail town programs, it's really about providing access to capital and lending. The programs that have been really successful provide that. Like I said, the Progress Fund out of Pennsylvania, they were part of a CDFI, so they were able to do that small business lending. If you can't do that, there's a lot of value added you can do, but then you're really missing that small business support piece. And then that slides into the next bullet, which is really about offering that coaching to small businesses, helping entrepreneurs get started, and then really having staffing capacity in this program to keep it going, right? I've seen some things that are more volunteer led, and I think that's amazing. But if you can get to a point where you can have someone assigned in the way that you would like a Main Street program, that's really what's needed to make it happen. And then in next slide, please. I wanted to just start to wrap up and give you a couple more examples of this kind of work. So in my previous life, I worked in economic development. I actually did a project with HGAC in 2011. I worked at the International Economic Development Council, did a lot of economic recovery work from natural and man-made disasters, and did an awesome project with HGAC on developing coastal tourism as an economic development driver. I believe this was an EDA grant we were working on in the wake of Hurricane Ike, if I'm remembering my hurricanes correctly. And it was looking specifically at Brazoria, Chambers, Galveston, and Matagorda counties. And just wanted to flag this because while it's more broadly coastal tourism, we do get into the recreation economy, and it was a long trip that we did. We brought in experts that get into experts in tourism. What does it take to really be a tourism county? And I think we spent like 5 days in those four counties. We gathered at the end of it, I think we gathered a huge group of people together. Maybe some of you were even there, and had a big meeting and developed strategies of kind of how to get, how to support this kind of work. And so this report from 2011, I think I was looking at it with Sarah and some of the HGAC staff, and I think a lot of those strategies still hold up. And a lot of them really align with the same thing, that I've been talking about in terms of trails and trail towns and recreation economies. So this is either maybe your work or your past colleagues' work, and just wanted to point this out because I think there's a lot of good thinking in there that's specific to those four counties. And then the next couple of slides, I just wanted to share with you that one of the projects that we've had the privilege to work on is in the Lower Rio Grande Valley, and they did this fabulous plan. I think it was about almost 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago at this point, before Rails to Trails got involved, called the Active Plan. And it's really about how to thoughtfully invest in and weave together the future of their trails network, their bike network, and their water network for kayaking and non-motorized boating and all that. So it's a really thoughtful plan. I put the link there for you to grab it. Again, a lot of those same strategies that were in the prior report I just mentioned that we did with HGAC, and a lot of the strategies I've been mentioning this morning. You'll see a lot of common themes, and they'll get into a lot of details. But they basically just made this a political priority down in the Lower Rio Grande Valley. It was all the municipalities in Cameron County coming together to invest in this plan, and then to continue to invest in it and to build out the work continues to connect their trail system. So it's not a wealthy county, as you know, but I just wanted to show you how one place in South Texas has really made great momentum. And the next slide shows a great piece. We brought in a bunch of recreation journalists, and we did a bike trip with them, and that's the photo on the bottom left. We did a multi-day bike trip with them to show them kind of what the vision for this project is, what what it could be. And there was a great piece done by Brandon Winthrow in the oh God, why am I blanking on what this is? Is it the Daily Beast? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what it was, but that's the little headline there. It's a national media piece. It was a great piece. So just wanted to show you kind of again another strategy for kind of how you can bring attention to your fledgling projects. The next couple of slides, this I'm going to just kind of skip over really quickly. These are the Katy Trail State Park in Missouri. It goes across the width of the state of Missouri. This is a project that started in the mid 80s, I think, and has just had fabulous outcomes. I love this map because it shows you as a trail user kind of how you could align your days and your trips. And if you just go really quickly through those next couple of slides, please, Sarah, you can just flash through them. This shows you just some photos and then kind of the outcomes of what kind of connecting that trail system looks like. Sarah, how am I doing on time?
About 3 minutes, and then we'll take a couple questions.
Okay, that's awesome. I can wrap up. Thank you so much. So I wanted to wrap up with what's your all's role and kind of how can you play a role in all of this. So the first thing to talk about in terms of your role, or actually, Sarah, let's go back to success factors. Sorry, I'm going too fast. So just really quick on success factors, kind of what are the things that seem to work when we're trying to tie these trails and these economic goals, especially in more rural places, together. We know that service-oriented businesses cluster together. So that's something, again, seems really common sense, but sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. So that's something you want to really think about the spatial elements of that. Again, events. This is really important. Anything I've seen that's been successful, they continue to do events, they continue to do programming, they do things that really draw awareness to that piece of infrastructure and to kind of everything around it. A feeling of safety. Again, that's really by having the trail be very accessible, very visible, very easy to get to, have multiple points, like that example from Frederick, Maryland, where it's so easy, like within a half a block, you can be getting on and off that trail. You don't have to go a long distance before you can hop off of it again. And so that really gets to eliminating those physical barriers. And so wrapping up to go into what does this mean in terms of, the work that you're all doing, I think it's really, there's so many things you can be thinking about. You can be thinking about how do you proactively identify and address, barriers, right? Like kind of what are those incentives? What are the barriers? What do you need to be providing if you're working for a municipality or a county government? Where can those interventions be? Who are the people you could be working with? I think so often we get stuck working in our silos, and so much of the work that we do at Rails to Trails is bringing folks together, that maybe there's someone that's more on the trail advocacy or recreation advocacy side of things, and bringing them together with the person that's doing economic development on the local level, whatever the things are. But I think it's really about breaking down those barriers. Really about dedicating resources. I can't tell you how important this is, that the positions that a lot of you are in as economic developers, as Main Street professionals, as planners, how important it is to help bring the political will and the support for continuing to fund this infrastructure. And not only the trail itself, but again, doing this forethought, in terms of the planning it takes to really think about this holistically in terms of how you can use it to drive economic growth in terms of, Main Street and integration with small businesses, those kinds of things. Thinking about using value capture. How are you going to kind of pay for it over time? How are you going to maintain it? And then next slide, please. Thinking about taking action again from that initial planning phases of it. Is it going to get so successful that even at the rural scale, it can get really expensive, right? And so something we've seen happen is community land trusts are really taking off to really preserve lower rents for businesses, or even affordable housing. With the housing shortage, this is a really important point. And then really talking to those business owners that either the ones you hope to cultivate as entrepreneurs or the already existing ones. Those are folks that, as you know, they're in kind of survival mode every day. They can't come out to a meeting. So really about you going to them, you talking to them, you asking them, what are they seeing? How much business are they getting from the trail? What would help them? And so really just making those connections. And then next slide, I think is more of pretty much what I already talked about. So I'll skip that one. It was from a presentation I gave that was specifically to economic developers. And then the next slide, I'll just mention really quickly that these are kind of the major federal programs for trails. And if you go to our website, railstotrails.org/policy, we track a lot of this, and you can actually see it for, most of you are in Texas. You can actually see how does Texas do at using those dollars that are supposed to be dedicated to active transportation. I would encourage you to look at that or email me. Next slide. This is just the last thing I'll say is this is a great example where the state of Indiana, which is a very rural state, has at the highest political level coming from the governor, has really prioritized trails and trail networks at the highest level. And they put in a huge amount of funding to support this, to make sure they have a really thoughtful trail network throughout their whole state that's supporting economic development. And not only did they put in their own state money, they got recovery funds, and then they put in an additional $60 million from their recovery funds. So I love this example. We're going to be spotlighting Indiana more in the near future, because I love that example of a rural state really prioritizing that. And then I snuck in some other federal resources here that I would, on the next slide, that I would encourage you to check out, or I'm happy to answer questions about it. So I know I've talked for a while. I will pause, and thanks for your attention, and I'll be happy to take questions if there's time for that, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I think we'll ask one question, and then there's a couple others in the chat that I'll ask if you want to respond to them in the chat afterwards. One of them specifically might be a good connection to make for that Trail Nation project. So the question we'll ask is, how should communities acquire and develop comprehensive economic impact data to use towards public outreach or grant applications or other things?
How should they do it? Is that the question?
Yes, or if you have any suggestions for how to do that.
Well, I think it's best if you can have a little bit of funding where you can pay an economic firm to look at it. They'll use, models. Sometimes there's university extensions if you don't have that budget. Sometimes, and maybe Dr. Gilliland could talk about this, but sometimes university extension programs will do that kind of work gratis or highly discounted. And so that can be a way to get that same high quality modeling data without, maybe spending like sometimes 50 grand or more to do those reports. So they can be expensive, but I think there are creative ways where you could save if you don't have that budget.
Great. Okay, well, we'll leave the other questions in the chat for you to respond to. And everyone has Liz's email there as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll introduce our next speaker. He'll be talking a little bit more about trails here locally. So I'd like to introduce Laurie Lomas Gonzalez, who is a wildlife biologist at the Trinity River National Wildlife Refuge here in Liberty, Texas. So Laurie, if you're able to share your screen. Let's see. Andrea, do you see if Laurie's able to be co-host and share? Oh, there she is. Wonderful. There you go, Laurie.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. And I will go ahead and pull up my slideshow. One moment. All right. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Wow, that is some really great info that everybody has been sharing. It's gotten me really excited. My name is Laurie Lomas Gonzalez. I'm the wildlife biologist at Trinity River National Wildlife Refuge. I work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This is my office, the bottomland hardwood forests of Trinity River. The subject I'll be discussing today is the From Crosswalks to Boardwalks initiative. This initiative was designed to get the citizens of Liberty from the crosswalks of Liberty to the boardwalks of the refuge. Many partners helped to form From Crosswalks to Boardwalks initiative. Over 1,000 volunteers have come together to build this project. Through this initiative, we aim to promote outdoor wellness, increase public nature access, greater ecotourism, and to inform our local population that Trinity River National Wildlife Refuge is present in their city. Now you may be asking, where is Liberty, Texas? We are a rural
Laurie.
town.
Laurie, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I think you might not be sharing your slideshow screen. We still see the slideshow with the slide organizer, and I think
yeah, okay. Thank you for that. That's odd. Okay, so you're not seeing any slides changing at this point?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's see here. Let's try sharing a different screen. Okay. PowerPoint, where are you? Huh.
Laurie, I have your slides ready if you want me. Oh, you've got it. Okay.
Well, let's see. Do you see my PowerPoint presentation, the slide?
Now we do. Yes.
Okay, and if I change that, do you see that?
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Okay. Shall I start again then?
Sure. I don't think you were that far in. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, once again, this is Laurie Lomas Gonzalez, the wildlife biologist at Trinity River National Wildlife Refuge with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This is my office. Isn't that gorgeous? I get to go to that every day. The subject I'll be discussing today is From Crosswalks to Boardwalks initiative. And this initiative was designed to get people from the crosswalks of the city to the refuge. And many, many volunteers helped. And well, as you can see in the pictures, this is the goal of getting people to the refuge. We want to promote outdoor wellness, increase public nature access, greater ecotourism, and well, inform everybody that we're here. We've been here for 27 years. You may be wondering where Liberty, Texas is. And we are a rural area in Southeast Texas between Houston and Beaumont, but we're within 1 hour's drive of 6 million people. Now, this refuge is 27 years old and comprised of approximately 60 parcels spread out from the northern edge to the southern edge of the county of Liberty County. And we follow the Trinity River. We don't actually own any of the river, just the lands near it. And I want you to look at this area right here. Our headquarters is located in this central location, denoted by the star, and we're right at the border of the city limits. So let's zoom into this project area. Now, we actually own 3,000 acres of floodplain forest on the north and west sides of the city of Liberty, and we overlap by 1,000 acres. Because of extensive flooding, we worked with the city to place all of our infrastructure on municipal lands, and our trails are on the refuge areas. Now, first we focused our areas to the green space where people already visit to recreate outdoors. And that gray space in this red, Liberty Municipal Park is this gray space within that red box. And this purple line that you see is their multi-use trail. And Liberty Municipal Park is the primary green space for the city of Liberty, and it features 2 miles of accessible hiking trails. Now, these trails are well loved. They're fantastic because, well, people can already bicycle on them if they need wheelchair access or flat level ground. This is a great place for them to visit. This is also a great place where parents take children in strollers, and also where people go running and jogging. And this area is very well taken care of. Note how open the understory is. It feels safe. It's a well taken care of park, and it's mowed at least once a week. And the City of Liberty also in this park maintains, of course, parking spaces, bathroom, and picnic areas within their municipal park. Now, these are things that we would not be able to provide in Trinity National Wildlife Refuge, Trinity River National Wildlife Refuge. And that's because we flood. So we wanted to partner with the city to take advantage of these amenities. So by design, the Nabinese Trail connects to the Liberty Municipal Park hiking loop. I tend to call the Nabinese Trailhead the gateway to the refuge, but because behind that gateway are 17 miles of hiking trails. I'd like to take you on a virtual field trip to the National Wildlife Refuge, and let's cross our fingers that this video will work. Video from different sources that shows a great example of what it's like if you were to visit the refuge and the magic of going out and being absolutely immersed in nature from your feet to over your heads. Now, these trails are low cost to maintain. As you look at it, we simply paint the blazes as high as possible in the trees and use yellow markers and decals to mark the trail. High usage keeps the trails worn on the ground. Now I want you to make sure to look at that red line up there, and that is how high the water floods in there. And so you can see that's why we can't offer amenities down in there in those areas, and why we have to partner with the city. These trails can flood 17 feet deep during the worst of our floodings, and we have annual floodings sometimes 2-3 times a year. Sometimes they last up to 6 months. Our longest flood has subsisted for almost 2 years. And so when these trails aren't flooded, they're a fantastic way to get people outdoors. And like I said, they're very cost effective to maintain. So next, after Liberty Municipal Park, we targeted locations where the ends of neighborhood roads terminated at our city levee, but offered access through our gates and over culverts. Now note the yellow dots at the edge of the green polygons. These trailheads are placed in neighborhoods of middle and low income. The people who live in the area already visited the refuge through these points since they were old roads and right-of-ways. However, we have put the infrastructure there to formally open them and make them more welcoming to visitors and provide maps. We have provided kiosks, bike racks, wayfinding infrastructure, and parking lots at these areas. Now remember, these areas are on city lands, on the right-of-ways. They are not on refuge lands. So without the city and their partnership, we couldn't carry out this project. And it's Boy Scouts of America who actually built a lot of the infrastructure that's out there. And so it's a great way to make community partnerships with other organizations in your town. And after adding in those trailheads, we also added bike and hike type information. We added a mode of connection to try and encourage people to visit the refuge without the use of a motor vehicle. Trying to get people outdoors, using their bikes, using their bodies, and finding different ways to recreate responsibly without needing gasoline, just, using foot pedal power or walking the streets, on hiking the streets. Now, these yellow lines that you see in black and white, or black and yellow in the middle of town, are bike routes. Now, visitors often ask if they can bike on our trails because but they can't, because they're really muddy trails and they're subject to erosion and can be rather hazardous. Those cypress knees can be impalement hazards. And so we don't want people out on the trails with their bicycles. Also, I've visited areas where bicycling or mountain biking on the trails is allowed, and they tend to go off trail and make their own challenging trails. And so we certainly don't want that sort of, it's kind of like it's a sort of vandalism, and we don't want that going on out there. So we encourage people to pedal to the trailheads on the city roads. And to encourage bike usage, we created a plan to designate a network of bicycle routes to connect the schools and the neighborhoods to our trailheads. And I want to reiterate, these are bike routes, not bike lanes. There is a difference. Liberty is the third oldest city in Texas. So sidewalks and bicycle specific lanes are not present nor legal by Mute CD standards. And these are the federal regulations for how we use our roads and what we may build on them. However, bicycle routes where you share the road with motor vehicles are legal, feasible, and a great way to get cyclists away from the very dangerous main street of Liberty, of the city of Liberty, to the less busy side streets. The city of Liberty, their main street doesn't have
Laurie? I think we might have lost Laurie, so we'll give her a minute to join back in. All right, it looks like we might have lost Laurie, and so while we wait for her to get back, unless, sorry everyone about this, some technical difficulties here. Should be back in just a minute or two. All right, we might not be able to get Laurie back, which is a shame. We were just getting into the meat of the presentation there, but I think that what we'll do is we'll just move on to our next speaker, and then hopefully we can circle back with Laurie and put her in touch with any questions that you might have about the Crosswalks to Boardwalks initiative in Liberty and how you might be able to do something similar in partnership in your town or community. So Shelley, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but I'll introduce our next. Oh, yes, Andrea. Okay, I'll introduce our next speaker, who is Shelley Plant, the Nature Tourism Coordinator at the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. And I'll turn it over to you to share your screen. And
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we'll give this a go. Let me just have it follow me. All right, you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Let me make myself go away. Does that make me? Oh, I'm still there. Okay. So we're going to be talking about nature tourism, and I have a whole lot to cover in a very short amount of time. The good news is I'm the contact for a lot of these programs, and if I'm not the contact for the program, I can connect you with the right person. So if you see something that sparks your interest or you didn't know about or you want to be a part of, my contact info will be at the end. Why is it not going forward? All right. So first off, you just need to, if you're wanting to do nature tourism, I know it's not for every community, but really thinking about what it is, that responsible travel to natural areas, conserving the environment, improving the welfare of local people. It's based on the natural attractions of an area, and it should be economically sustainable. So we have goals that sustainable economic development for the local community, habitat conservation, support for conservation programs, and then that recreational and learning opportunities for the public. People need something to do, and connecting with nature is a great way to do it, especially as we learned during the pandemic. So it's usually very small scale and low tech. It's developed around local and natural features and attractions. It can be compatible with agriculture or other landowner businesses. And communities that have a real sense of place really do well in the nature tourism realm. So it's perfect for rural communities and small towns. How popular is it? First, some easy stats, which are more Americans camp than play basketball. Number of Americans who go bicycling is double the population of Canada, and more Americans paddle than play soccer. And so I just like to throw those out because we talk in numbers of millions of people and billions of dollars, but I think this puts it in some framework that's a little bit easier to digest and think about. But we can talk about money too. So nationally, it's $144.7 billion industry, but locally it's big business too. We know fishing and hunting is super big in Texas, 2.2 million anglers, a million hunters, expenditures of about $2 billion each, $3.7 billion of economic impact from that $2 billion spent, 3.6 and $3.7 billion impact. But wildlife watching is nothing to sneeze at. We have 4.4 million participants, half of which are birders specifically. And that's $1.8 billion in expenditure, but their impact is bigger. It's $13.8 billion worth of impact in the communities that they're going wildlife viewing in. And I love to look at the numbers. So if you look at the dark orange, it kind of plateaus, it goes up and down a little bit. That's hunting. Fishing is really stable as well. I mean, that's the good news. A lot of states, there's been a huge dip, and at least in Texas, there's a plateau for both of those really important industries. But wildlife watching just keeps growing. There are more and more wildlife viewers, and we aren't investing a lot of money necessarily into this constituency if they are a huge constituency and people that you would want to be visiting your towns. So every town's going to be different, and these are some of the reasons that a community or a business might decide to get into nature tourism. They might want to supplement their existing income, have more entertainment options so people want to stay in their towns longer. More heads in beds equals more money for the community. Preserve and maintain a desired lifestyle. Being able to support things that make your town unique in the natural resource realm will help maintain who you are as a community. Creating a shoulder season. You may have really strong fishing season, or you may have a really strong summer season, but maybe you don't have winter or fall or spring visitation the way you'd like. Nature tourism could fill that niche. Invest in projects that support your hobbies. So I've seen businesses do this, or even towns, if they have someone who's super interested in birding, they could take that on as an activity that they as a community want to support because they have that expertise within the town. Help others understand the local resources. People protect that which they understand. So if you have business and tourism around those things that you really care about, you're going to create a better understanding. conservation of those local resources, and any number of other goals. So the first thing to do if you haven't opened the door to nature tourism and you're just getting started is you really need to do a preliminary inventory and look at what other opportunities are out there that you could tag on to for free in some cases, or even get money from in some cases. And that's the bulk of what I'm going to talk about today. But you're determining what your community is interested in. You know, are you a history community? Are you a nature community? Do you have a huge cultural heritage that you want to celebrate? Is shopping a big part of it, or hunting? Are there other things? And then your community should reflect that. So when you look at these towns, you know what they're about. Canadian has this amazing old bridge that's been turned into a hike and bike trail from the downtown area outside of town. And the locals use it and visitors use it. Alpine, it's a cowboy city. Lufkin, trees and nature. You know, Port Aransas, it's the island life. You can see a little bit about what the community is, and you can tell what they've decided their interests are just by looking at them. Other thing is just inventorying what is already there. You don't necessarily need to build new things to create tourism, but just taking a catalog of what you already have built. And there are existing programs that can help you find some of those things, but parks, museums, historic sites, any other local jewels that you think tourists would like, locations that could be developed over time. You can come up with some long range planning, 5-year plans, 10-year plans. What do you want to develop as you have tourism success? And these are some of the things that already exist out there. You have heritage trails, you have paddling trails, you have the Great Texas Coastal Birding Trail and the Great Texas Wildlife Trails, historical markers. There are a lot of things that already exist. So research, and more research. Luckily, nature tourism has been around in Texas for decades at this point. And so you can look up resources and tools and find ways to be successful in this. You can tap brains of people like me, people at Texas AgriLife Extension for more advice. You can talk to businesses that have been doing this a while, see how they like it, communities who've been doing this a while. You can go look at their websites, beg, borrow, and steal the things you like to do a revamp of your own website or your Facebook page. And there are several tools listed on these 2 websites to take you further. Again, with 20 minutes, I don't have a lot of time to dive deep, so I'm going to give you resources to go dive deep on your own. And then look at existing operations. You can get ideas for your website. Like I said, you can find out how they do brochures and rack cards, how they make a coordinated look, how they tie different types of activities and entertainment together over a successful brand for their community as a whole. I am notorious for this. I go to visitor centers, I go to travel information centers, I go to my hotel lobbies, and I pull brochures because I really want to see how people are marketing themselves and how they're branding themselves. And if you're looking at, you know, redesigning or rebranding your community, that's a great place to start, because you can start to see what you like, what caught your attention, and that can help guide you in any decisions you're making. Consider potential partners. You know, you don't have to go it alone, especially in small communities. It's great sometimes to become a destinational region. So what communities are nearby that y'all might want to market together and pool your resources? I've seen this done with beds and breakfasts in the Valley. Birding Bed and Breakfast, they coordinated and collected money, and they marketed themselves together. They knew that each of them couldn't put up that many people, so together they could put up a lot of people. And there is now, used to be South Texas Nature, it's now extended to, I think, Texas Birding is what it's called, but it's extended all the way up to Beaumont and Port Aransas and even far West Texas. I saw there was someone on the meeting for that. So, you know, get involved in these collaboratives. They're ways to make your dollars go farther. And oftentimes they'll have a sliding scale. So larger communities may pay more to be a part of that collaborative, while smaller communities may pay less. But then y'all market together and y'all create more marketing and promotion than you could on your own. So I am going to quickly go through a lot of programs that I could spend a lot of time on their own, but Texas Parks and Wildlife has the Great Texas Wildlife Trails. That includes the Great Texas Coastal Birding Trails. We have the Great Texas Birding Classic, Texas Paddling Trails, and all 3 of those fall in my shop. Bird City, Texas, which I know Surfside's going to talk about in a little bit, so I won't go too deep there, but I'm on the steering committee for that as well. And we partner with Audubon Texas. Texas Parks and Wildlife partners with Audubon Texas on that program. And I'll tell you a little bit about where to find more on grants too. So the Great Texas Wildlife Trails, if you have wildlife viewing sites in your community and you are not on these maps, you should be, and you can apply to do so. So what are they? We wanted to increase awareness and appreciation and conservation of wildlife and native habitats in our state back in the 90s. And so we wanted to promote wildlife viewing as well as a recreational activity. We knew people were coming to Texas for birding, but we weren't really marketing to them. And we want to demonstrate the economic value of wildlife through tourism dollars. So the wildlife trails were created as a way to unify existing and potential sites into one huge marketing platform that happened to be paper maps, but now has extended to a mobile-friendly website. We were the first state to ever do this. We did this back in 1996. This year is our 25th anniversary. Now over 40 states have birding and wildlife trails based on this Texas model. But it did start here and it started on the coast. And so these were separated into 5 different regions, but 9 maps total. And the coastal is upper central and lower Texas coast. We have far west Texas is the last trail in the series. But now we have 9 maps over the entire state of Texas that cover over 900 wildlife viewing sites in our state. And these are driving trails. They're driving trails from different nature sites. So some of the sites are community parks, some are state, federal parks, some are county parks, some might be a nature center or a zoo that has a great native animal display. It may be a hawk highway, a place that you can drive through and you know there's going to be great hawk viewing, or a pull out to a wildlife viewing space. And they're public and private sites, mostly public sites, but there are more and more private sites as more and more private industry gets into nature tourism. And there are all kinds of things. There are trails, signs, observation platforms, driving routes, visitor centers, photography blinds. And we keep investing money in it through the Birding Classic each year. They're beautiful maps if you've never seen them. They make great displays. They're really large with gorgeous art on every single one of them. And what we have now is we have these printed maps for all 9 regions. We have this mobile-friendly website that Parks and Wildlife has created. We have free rack cards about the program, and we also do online, and we also do advertising in magazines and through email marketing. And we're hoping that we'll be doing more online marketing as well in the future. So this is what the rack card looks like. Again, we have maps for free, and you can get them at the bulk rate. If you wanted to sell them, and the bulk rate is under $1 a piece, and we sell the maps for $5 a piece. So if you have a gift shop or a way to sell them, you could get maps at a bulk rate and you could sell them at $5 like we do, or you could undercut us and sell us at $3 and still make, you know, a lot of money on that purchase, a good return on investment. Or you can give them away for free. If you have the money to buy them and give them away for free, you can do that too. And then we have the rack cards that are free. And we distribute them at birding festivals. I'll be at the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival next month, selling maps and giving away rack cards, telling people how to use our website. So all of this is available to you. The next program, again, we're flying through this, but is paddling trails, the Texas Paddling Trails program. If you have water in or near your community, you could be a part of the paddling trails if you aren't already. We have trails all over the state. This map is not updated, but it shows you quite a few of them. We're now up to 78 Texas paddling trails. We're looking to launch a new one pretty soon, actually. And our goal as an agency was we want to increase public access to water-based recreation, both fishing and canoeing and kayaking. We wanted to create family-friendly water trails, develop partnerships to help manage and improve those access sites over time, and promote habitat conservation. A lot of people are getting interested in paddling. There are more than 1 million paddlers in the state of Texas. And a lot of people don't know some of the rules of the road in paddling. So having a paddling trails program allowed us the opportunity to educate people and also tell them about the fact that our state is largely privately owned. So by having a paddling trail, we're able to guarantee they met certain criteria. If they're on one of our trails, they know they're a 4 to 12 mile segment. If they get on, there is going to be a public place that they can get off within a reasonable amount of paddle. There are many places in Texas where that is not true. You could get on a river and not have another public access for 30 or 40 miles. So now you've forced a trespass issue, a safety issue, an overnight paddle issue, a lot of things that you don't want. The paddling trails program is trying to solve that for people. There's public access and parking and population center nearby. We're We have new improved access sites on all of the trails. The project's not fully funded, so the community partnership model is super important to make this program go. Parks and Wildlife provides technical expertise and marketing assistance, and the community provides the on-the-ground site management and signage. We create the panels that go in the signage. The community partner pays for the sign kiosk that that panel goes into. And we've seen it really take off. So while we are doing those minimal things, some communities have created entire paddling clubs and paddling trail committees, local instructors that utilize these trails for more tourism. They do annual events like flotillas, races, festivals, or even cleanups. And then I've seen all kinds of local promotion driving through towns. I've seen, bumper stickers, t-shirts. I've seen rat cards and brochures and a local Buc-ee's. I've seen all kinds of different things where communities really run with it and taken ownership of the paddling trail and used it to its best tourism advantage, which has been awesome to watch. And we advertise it. So these are examples of magazine articles that we've run in Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine, as well as Texas Monthly. And again, that's no cost to the community partner. That's just part of being part of the program. You would get this sort of advertising. As a result, people would be going to the website and looking for trails. We have free rat cards. We decided not to do brochures that list all of the trails because as soon as they'd be printed, they'd be out of print. I mean, they'd be out of date because we add trails so regularly. So really, we decided to do a rat card that tells people how to use the website and what kind of information they would find. And so the next big program to talk about that could be useful to your community is the Birding Classic. I know a lot of communities on the Upper Coast do take part in this, but we were only on the coast for the first 16 years. And then in 2013, we became a statewide event. And our 25th annual event was this year as well, in spring of 2021. So it's fun, friendly competition. It's for birders of all levels, beginners to experts, and it promotes nature tourism to Texas communities, raising money for birds and birding. All the money raised on this goes to either fund the program or pay out grants. I zero out this program every year, and then we start from scratch for the next year. So we have big sits, which are awesome. Lots of people getting together. Only one person needs to ID the bird for it to go on the list. So if you have a ringer on your team, any people can be a part of this. I've seen communities really embrace the big sit because it's such a fun event that you can do. And you are actually in one place for the day. So it's easy to get media to come by. You can get your local newspaper to come by and take photos or be a part of your team. So it's a good way to get some marketing and promotion for your area as a nature tourism destination is to enter as a big sit and do that as part of the Birding Classic. But we also have adult teams and we have human powered teams and we have sunrise to noon teams, which are all ages. So a lot of families do this. I've seen, we have youth teams where it's kids competing on their own with an adult chaperone or mentor. And then we have state park teams. So you can do a Birding Classic team all day long in a state park of choice. So teams choose sunrise to noon, full 24-hour, week-long tournament categories. And they're not competing for prizes. I give winner certificates, but the winning teams in certain categories get to pick which approved projects are funded that year with the grants that we give out. And those funds are raised through registration fees and sponsorship dollars, and everything's available online that you would ever need at birdingclassic.org. The registration deadline is always April 1st, and the conservation grant deadline is always May 1st, and the tournament happens April 15th to May 15th. So if you wanted to be involved from a promotional standpoint, you could do a big sit or any other team, or you could sponsor an adult team. I know there was an Upper Coast community that sponsored an adult team this year that did really well in the competition, and they were able to promote that team's progress and what they saw and what they did. But regardless of if you do a team, your community could apply for grant funding by May 1st to be a part of the grants that are considered by the winning teams. And so these are birding projects. They're either restoration, acquisition, or enhancement projects. So if you have a boardwalk you're trying to put in, or a birding blind, or you have signage that you wanted to improve, or you need to eradicate some invasive species and put natives in, those are types of projects that we fund all the time through Birding Classic grants. And the last major program is Bird City. And again, I'm not going to go deep because this will be covered by Surfside, but this is a relatively new program. birdcitytexas.org is the website. And this is for communities that are doing really good work in the space of creating safer spaces for birds, habitat enhancement and protection for birds, and community engagement with bird education as the focus. So everything from like lights out programs to dark skies lighting to native plant sales or plant giveaways. It includes a lot of different things. There are evaluative metrics that are used to determine once a community has been accepted in the program. And the community helps determine some of those, but some different qualities that you would have in a Bird City, Texas application have different criteria with specific required metrics, like number of acres that you're preserving or acquiring or restoring, number of people that you serve through a birding festival or bird walks or educational seminars, number of native plants you've planted through tree plantings or native plant restoration. And there's an annual report that's due every year for any certified community. And so we started this, like I said, a couple of years ago in 2019. The first year we certified 4 different communities: Bastrop, Dallas, Houston, and Port Aransas. And in 2020, we certified 3 more communities: Galveston, San Antonio, and Surfside Beach. And the application period's open right now, but it's closing pretty soon. So I think in November, your application is due, but go to birdcitytexas.org to learn more. They really are science-based criteria that we're really proud of, because they really do show true bird conservation and a commitment from the community to do true bird conservation. As you can see, we do all different sizes of towns and cities, so anyone would be eligible. And then last but not least, I am going to tell you, if you aren't familiar with the state parks grant programs for communities, you should go to tpwd.texas.gov/grants and look at all the different grant opportunities that are available. We have outdoor recreation grants, indoor recreation grants, small community grants, co-op grants, community outdoor outreach grants, recreational trails grants, and boat access grants. And they all have different application deadlines. The staff on our grants team is very helpful. If you call them, they will call you back and they will talk to you about what kind of different grant opportunities are available, how to make the best application going forward. They are incredibly knowledgeable, helpful, and want to help people do good things with grant funding in their communities. And so I've seen these things used for all different kinds of reasons for outdoor recreation. And some of them can be quite large. So go investigate further if you are looking for grant funding. I saw a question earlier asking about some funding. And so today, that was a lot, but no, you could be a new site on the Great Texas Wildlife Trail if you have good birding and wildlife viewing sites that aren't on the trails yet and you want to be. We have an application. You could try to make that happen. We have new paddling trails. We're always looking for new applications with communities who want to be great partners in this project. So you can do an application for that as well. Participating in the Great Texas Birding Classic can be a promotional opportunity, a way to get your community on the map as someone that cares about wildlife viewing and get some promotion through media outlets. You could also apply for conservation grants through the Birding Classic, regardless of if you do a team. And you could apply to become a Bird City, Texas community if you feel like you can put all the things in place that need to happen and hit those really strict science criteria that they have. And then there are local grant opportunities through Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. And I think I did that in just 20 minutes, which is what I was told to do. So this is my contact information if you need to reach me.
Shelley, thank you so much. That summary slide is great. I hope that folks will share the presentations, of course, on our website afterwards. And you have Shelley's contact information. Right now, I think we'll go to the chat to take some questions, either for Laurie, who I believe has been able to rejoin us, or Shelley. So feel free to put questions for Laurie or Shelley in the chat now. And I'll ask one for you, Shelley. Has there been analysis on how seasonal the economic impact of birding is? And how can communities best plan around the potential seasonal nature of economic activity when considering wildlife-based ecotourism investments?
I'm trying to understand, see if I understand. What birding really does, depending on where you are in Texas, is it should hopefully give you a shoulder season throughout the year So there aren't really bad seasons in Texas. There are just different species that can be seen each season. So on the upper Texas coast, I know near Winnie, there's actually some whooping cranes that come in winter here. And so that is a bird that people really want to see. And they used to only be able to go to the coastal bend to see it, but now there's a spot on the upper coast to see it. You have bats in the summer, you have butterflies that migrate through in the fall and the spring. You also have butterflies that stay over year round. In the upper coast, you sometimes get hummingbirds that overwinter. They don't migrate through. They decide that it's hospitable enough that they stick around. You have hawks that migrate through and hummingbirds that do migrate through a lot in the fall. And there are hawk watches throughout the region in the fall. And then the spring, you have a lot of birding festivals. But that's the beauty of wildlife viewing and the more temperate nature of Texas is that, especially in the coast, you can have wildlife viewing pretty much year round. It just might be different things that you're marketing. I took a slide out. Maybe I should have left it in. I do encourage making a calendar of events for your community. So you're kind of looking at all the things that you have to offer and all the things that people might come to your town to look at month by month. And so you can see the things that happened year round for your community, whether that be shopping or entertainment. And then you can see the things that are seasonal so that when you're marketing or you're emailing or you're posting on Facebook, you're highlighting the things that are happening now. So if you know that one thing happens year round, but you know something else only happens September, October, then you're going to promote that one thing that only happens September, October, right? And not the thing that happens year round. You're going to use that for some of the gaps in the year. And so it's really easy to do on a spreadsheet to make that kind of calendar of events to help you plan how you're going to market and promote, because we all know keeping visitors and having them come back and return is a lot easier than creating a new visitor. So giving them a reason to come back to a place that they really like time after time for different experiences is also really important. I'm not sure if that answers the question. Communities can best plan around potential seasonal nature of economic activity when considering wildlife. Again, I would say you're going to want to use the wildlife-based ecotourism investments for the times of the year when you aren't swarmed with other visitors. So if you are a beach community and you have people here in droves in the summer, then you're going to start focusing on your wildlife viewing opportunities come fall and winter to try to entice people back, give them a reason to come in the off season.
That's great. I definitely think that answers the question. And we'll see. We'll give it just a minute to see if anyone else has questions. Again, for Shelley or for Laurie, who dropped off with a couple slides left to go, was talking about that crosswalks to boardwalks trail connectivity program in Liberty. And all right, I don't see any
Sarah,
other.
I have a question in my chat.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
How does the Trinity River, apparently it's in everybody's chat, but anyway, how does the Trinity River coordinate promotion and marketing with Liberty? And like, how does that partnership work?
Oh, okay, great. So Laurie, that one's for you if you're on. Oh, don't tell me we lost Laurie again. Okay, well, we can get that question to her after the presentation today. That's a great question though, thank you. All right, so this is a great segue from Shelley's presentation into our final presentation for today. We'll be hearing from, oh, Laurie, you have another question in the chat. We'll be hearing from Sandy Shanks with the Village of Surfside Beach. You just saw that they got their Bird City certification in 2020. So I'd like to switch over screen share to Sandy, and you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay, let me try this screen share. Oh my goodness. All right. Let me know when you can see.
Looks good.
Okay. Okay, well, that was great, Shelley. That just gave me a lot of ideas and so on to the next project going forward. So I'll be contacting you. So we did apply for Bird City, Texas, and it was very rigorous. And we are the smallest Bird City representative, that recipient. And we have about 500 full-time residents, 500 part-time residents. And during the summer, we can't take any more people. at all. We're about 40 miles from Galveston, 50 miles from Houston. You see the little red dot. So we're surrounded by industry, except for the ocean, of course. We have Dow Chemical, BASF, LNG is right across the intercoastal. So we kind of try to buffer the industry with wildlife and, of course, the beach. And we wanted to designate the area as being an ecotourism department, where we could have, like you said, in the shoulder seasons, during spring and fall, especially for the migration. And so we felt that Bird City was a natural fit for Surfside, since Brazoria County has the highest bird species count in the US. And we have many ecosystems that will attract all these birds. So, for example, we have the marshes, the beach, the jetties, the tree cover, and so on. Now, we did apply 2 times to be designated as Bird City and made it on the 2nd time. It is a very, very rigorous application. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't just an easy application to get. We had to have 9 required fields that we had to fill out, and then 17 others. And just because you say what you're going to do, you have to say how you're going to do it and how you're going to measure it. So that was even more difficult. So Shelley, you talked about the Texas Parks and Wildlife grant. So we did receive a grant from, I'm going too far, hang on, let me go back, from Texas Parks and Wildlife to build the Bird and Butterfly Trail in Surfside. And it's along the intercoastal waterway, about a 1/4 mile from the Gulf. And we cut through heavy brush, which revealed many native shrubs that we didn't even know were there, such as hackberry. Some of you may think those are a nuisance tree, but not to the birds, they love them, and toothache trees. So we wanted to have that new venue for Surfside residents and, of course, visitors. So here's our ecosystems, the ocean, the beaches, and the dunes. I don't know why my system is moving, but without me pushing the button. So we added a lot of native plants and created these trails. You see an overhead view of the Bird and Butterfly Trail. And you see that circular area on the left picture? That is part of our history tourism that we are developing as well. The Battle of Fort Velasco was fought in 1832 there. So we are connecting all the history dots with the nature dots as well. Volunteers did all the work for the trail. We have a group of college students that come every year from Wisconsin. They spend their spring break in Surfside, and they do work around Surfside and in Brazoria County. Of course, they did not come in 2020 or 21. So we're hopeful that they can come back and help us get some more things done at the trail, such as removing invasive species. And we have a lot of Japanese honeysuckle that we want to get rid of. So the planning started in 2018 and cut through the brush, like I said, and we had a grand opening in March of 2019, which was very well attended. I'm going to turn off my mouse. It must have a mind of my own today, of its own. So we created the trail. This was opening, and I just love this little picture of this little lady and her daughter on the right. It is ADA accessible, but she brought her walker where she could sit down whenever she needed to. And, you know, again, it's all about the birds. You know, we do not have the birds on the left all the time in Surfside, mostly just the spring. Of course, fall is a little bit more sporadic on the more migrations. The birds on the right, of course, are good representation of our resident birds. So, like I said, we had to do required details for the application. We had to say how we're going to increase attendance at events, increase visitors to the nature venues, increase bird species. Those are just some examples of the way we're going to track. So here's my computer is just got a little goblin in it, I think. So we have a nature fest every year, very well attended. We even had it, yes, during COVID. Surfside is somewhat of a little bit of a renegade on doing things, and it's all outdoors. You have the sea breeze keeping any germs away. We had a native plant sale with a native vendor in the area. My favorite part of the Nature Fest is a seed stomp, where we sprinkle out bluebonnet seeds or wildflower seeds, whatever we're doing each year, and then the kids get to stomp on them. They really, I had a video, but it wouldn't work right with my presentation. So, but then we had the Birds of Prey program, and everybody really loved that. They'd never had that program in Surfside before, so we were able to bring that to them. Part of our big projects for Bird City, Texas was a Surfside birding map that Mike Williams, I don't know if you follow bird photography, he's on social media as Mike Twilly, and he's a wonderful photographer, and he put this map together of the different points in Surfside that you can see certain birds, and then that's the seasons you can see them, which species, and it was quite a detailed project, and that probably one of the things that put us over the edge, I think, on the application. And we have a native tree giveaway. Apache Corporation gives communities or nonprofits trees to give away. I'm sorry, I do not know what's wrong with my computer. Every year. So we have been allotted 100 trees every year, and we give at least 80 away for Surfside residents to plant in Surfside. We're trying to get more native plants planted in yards and so on to increase the habitat for the birds, and try to get them not to plant quite so many palms. And so palms are nice, but we need to get some more diversity in berries for the birds and insect attractors. Our residents love the trail. They donated seating for the trail. This middle one is one of the top places to sit. You can look one way and you can see the gardens. You can look the other way and see the intercoastal, the ships coming in and out, and the dolphins running around. On the left, this area was discovered when they cut through the brush. That is an alcove, is what I call it, kind of a cave of hackberry trees. And you go in there and the little birds are just flitting around in the canopy, and it's a good 20 degrees cooler than anywhere else in there. And we are going to build a special water feature inside there as well. Businesses in Surfside. There's 400 businesses in Surfside, even though it's very small, because you have all of your restaurants, vacation rentals, retail, housekeeping, and lawn service and maintenance that support those vacation rentals. And of course, all those businesses are directly affected by tourism. And we wanted to help give them more tourism besides just in the peak season for the beach. So I don't know about some of your cities, but tourism in Surfside exploded during COVID 2020. The beach was full to capacity every weekend. Vacation rentals were booked solid, not so much the hotels, but so therefore the businesses that support the vacation rentals, housekeepers, lawn servers, etc., were extremely busy. The retail stores, the few that we have, were very busy. Now we all know that restaurants did struggle because of having to be closed, but they began offering curbside delivery and delivery. So it was a very opportune time to offer the nature tourism besides the beach. They felt like they were safe going to the beach and being out in the sea air, and actually felt safer in a vacation rental because they knew that not as many hands had touched all the surfaces and so on. So this is actually a mild weekend in Surfside, this picture. So everybody enjoyed themselves. So ecotourism during COVID. So we still held the majority of our tourism events during COVID because the events were outside. We had a nature fest, World Migratory Bird Day, kite flights. Some of them were at night, which I think I put a slide in here. Those are quite amazing. surfing Santas, Christmas tree lightings. And this, we believe, helped all of our business to be more successful during the peak of the pandemic. And we have some projects coming up in 2021, and we have to keep track of these projects, and we have to, you know, define the metrics for them and what we did. As y'all know, we experienced a pretty good freeze in February. So we had to replace 300 plants that did not make it. That's our mayor on the left with the auger helping to dig holes. And that's my car, the garden wagon these days, full of plants. Now, the natives that we planted, of course, most of them came back. And that's one reason you should plant natives. They are tough little plants and beautiful. And what's really interesting about native plants, they bloom at just the right time for the species of birds and pollinators that come through, if you've ever noticed that. So, and they bloom and seed out as well. So we're adding, in the process of adding native plants to this, goodness gracious, to the crabbing pier over the wetlands, and they created a new seating area. So we're going to be adding some grasses and so on there. We did extend the bird and butterfly trail by about a quarter mile to the public boat ramp and planted about 30 additional native trees. Restoring sand dunes. That's really not one of our projects as tourism. We have a Save Our Beach Association. They place donated Christmas trees, and this offers protection to human homes and provides nesting habitats. Now, unfortunately, the 4 storm surges we had last year were just destroyed the dunes, and they were just being built back. And then we had Hurricane Nicholas come through in September. So that took out the dunes again. So we're in the process of rebuilding, which we will do every year. So our World Migratory Bird Day 2021, we had speakers, educational booths, vendors, and activities. This year in 2022, it's going to be called Wings Over Surfside. It's a little bit easier to say. And that is also a requirement of bird cities to have a specific event targeted to birds and migration. Our Nature Fest, it is targeted to birds, but it's also any pollinators, any kind of nature, native plant sale. We're going to have we just had this 2 weekends ago, and it was awesome. We had a 65% increase in attendance, and we think that is really significant. Of that it was our 3rd annual, and we had created a precedent for it, so people really enjoyed it, and we had a really good time. Ongoing projects, beach cleanups. Of course, beach cleanups keeps the beach clean and promotes ecotourism. We haven't totally figured out how to get people to quit littering. We're working on it. If you guys have any ideas, be glad to hear it. Trail work days brings residents and visitors to Surfside to help plant. Citizen science, Christmas bird counts, eBird, iNaturalist, lights out for birds, sea turtle patrols. I know my time is about up, isn't it, Sarah? Yeah. Okay, I'm almost done. Okay. So Village of Surfside Beach was awarded also a Monarch Choice Key Texas Habitat Award by Monarch Gateway. If any of you know Barbara Willey, she's the founder of this project. She discovered that wind patterns brought the migrating butterflies, monarchs, into Surfside on certain migration routes. It's really cool how she figured that out. But anyway, she's an ongoing project. 2022 projects, water feature inside that hackberry grove that I showed you, birding blinds, bird signage, etc. And taking Mike's bird map that he's created, we're going to be creating signs off of that. First, you are here kind of sign, this is the type of bird you'll see, and so on. Community partners, you couldn't do it without community partners. Gulf Coast Bird Observatory is just 20 minutes away. They help master naturalists, master gardeners, NRCS, etc. We just really have amazing partners. So, and then our flower beds that we have with 9 flower beds, we have Adopt-A-Spot businesses or individuals that maintain them. And of course, our community volunteers there. Bird photographers, they love our area. So we know that another good thing about ecotourism is that they are respectful of the environment, and we love getting them here. We had a special visitor this year. He stayed for about 2 weeks. He flew in from the Northwest of the United States by mistake, I'm sure, and stayed for about 2 weeks and let, you know, thousands of birders come in and view him. I had a friend that says, yeah, I had that orange robin in my yard for a week or so. Well, he should have told me that earlier, but okay. So it's all about the birds. You know, we have such a diversity and diverse areas, and this, sorry. And this is the team. This is Eva, me, and Mike Williams, and then Michelle Booth is our tourism specialist for Surfside. She helped with some of the facts and research that we did. So we really enjoyed it. And if you would like to follow our progress, we have a Facebook group of Surfside Beach, Texas nature lovers. We post a lot of things, informational things and sightings and so on in there. And this is my contact info. And be happy to answer any questions while you're looking at this beautiful picture.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandy. Congratulations again on your certification. Looks like a lot of exciting things happening. We do have a couple of questions for you, or at least one in the chat. We are right at 11 o'clock though. So I'll just ask it very quickly. Does the city have a contract with vacation rentals to pay a tax or a fee to supplement that hotel or motel tax? They do.
Yes,
okay.
every vacation rental has to sign up with them, and they've also brought out a new system that automatically notifies vacation rentals when taxes are due, and
Great.
so on. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and we have everyone's contact information shared, and we'll make sure to send that in a follow-up as well. So if you have any questions, I'm sure that our speakers would be willing to answer those for you. We also will have all of the recording of today and all the presentations available online. So we'll send that link, and we'll include a survey for any feedback that you might have for today's event. So I'd like to just thank our presenters again today for wonderful presentations, lots of good information, and thank all of you for joining. And we hope to see you at another event soon. Thank you very much.